afternoon, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Joelle Kuzam, partner and employment practice group chair at Bricker Neckler, and on behalf of the entire board of trustees of CMC, it's my pleasure to be here with you today to welcome our new members, our sponsors, and our fabulous panel. Let's take a moment to thank today's forum partner, the Matriots. We would also like to thank the beautiful Grange Insurance Audubon Center for its ongoing support and for hosting us. And thank you as well to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for presenting today's live stream. Let's thank all of those supporting today's forum. And now for today's main event, Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor. Chief Justice O'Connor completed her term on Ohio's Supreme Court just 1 month ago. Her biographical information is in your flyer, and you'll hear more about it during the course of our time together. Her time on the court ended in the middle of Ohio's historic battle over gerrymandered electoral districts. Justice O'Connor has served in statewide offices since 1998 and is Ohio's longest-serving statewide elected woman. And now, please welcome today's speakers, Justice Maureen O'Connor, retired Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and our host, Yvette McGee Brown, currently a partner with Jones Day, and former Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. Justice McGee Brown, we look forward to today's conversation.
So you know how they say life has all kind of unexpected pleasures. You know, never did I imagine when I was appointed to the Supreme Court that I would get Maureen out of the deal. She was the best part of it. And so, you know.
Likewise.
People often are like, they got so upset at our parties when we were friends. Like, you cannot imagine how one picture of us together on the Columbus Dispatch created the most huge uproar in the state Democratic and state Republican parties.
Well, Yvette, we were hugging.
That's right. So we're going to start from the beginning. So a lot of you only know her as Chief Justice, and I will tell you that when I first met her, I was a bit scared of her too, and the reputation is well deserved. But let's start from the beginning, because I often hear parents talk about how to raise strong girls, and you are an example of that. You're one of 8 kids, 6 girls, 2 boys. You're the second oldest. How did little Maureen end up as the longest-serving woman in Ohio politics and the Chief Justice of our highest court?
That is a very good question. I don't know that I have an answer, except for the fact that I was raised to think and believe that I could do anything that I wanted to do. My parents were both educated, college educated. My grandparents, all 4 grandparents, were college educated. So education was the focus, and there was no way that you were going to quit school after high school, that's for sure. I think I was heartbroken when I heard my dad talk about where we were going to go to college, because I had no intention of going to college when I was in the 4th grade. I couldn't believe that we were going to have to go to college. But anyway, so education. And I went to a single-sex high school and college. It was all-women's Nazareth Academy in Parma Heights, Ohio. And I also then went to Seton Hill College in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. I was a leader in those schools. I was editor of the yearbook and chair of all kinds of committees in high school. I was class president freshman year in college, and so it was just something. I like to say I gravitate towards positions where I think I can, use my talents, that I could do something, and I've never come up against a problem that I didn't think I could solve. I want to solve all kinds of problems, even problems that I have no business, being involved in. But that is, in my nature. It's and not just, what you would think I would encounter in my career, in my professional career. I give people advice and try and help them, even if they're strangers. Their mistake is asking me something.
So as a plug for Columbus School for Girls, how much do you think going to a single-sex, secondary school helped you to develop the leadership skills that you have?
Oh, I think it was a combination. It was a combination because, I went to high school with girls who were very timid and would never, speak up. They hardly even answered things in class. We were taught mainly by Sisters St. Joseph, who, by the way, were so educated themselves and so encouraging of in leadership in women and the sciences, and current events. I took international, events, government. The curriculum was geared towards leadership, and I reflect on that. I don't know that I appreciated that or identified that, but in reflection, that is exactly what my high school did for me. And the Sisters of St. Joseph, I will give them, there were some wonderful, wonderful women that I bonded with as, a high school kid. And then, going on to college and all of the nuns that taught and they weren't all nuns. There were a lot of lay faculty, as they say, but everybody was, had their masters, had their PhD. And these were, I'm talking about the nuns, and that is kind of maybe a misconception about how educated they are, and it was, and quite frankly, my great aunt went to Seton Hill, and my mother went there, and my aunt went there, and my older sister went there. So there was no choice. But my
Your dad gave you choice. He told you.
oh yeah, I could live at home and go to any college, Catholic college in Cleveland, or I could go to Seton Hill, which was like 2.5, 3 hours away. What do you think I picked? So, but I'm talking about my great aunt, Sister Mary Charles, Ursuline nun, went to Seton Hill, and then she went on to Columbia to get her PhD. And this was probably in the 30s that this was going on. So I guess I want to correct the misconception that once they entered the religious life, that was it as far as education or ambition. Just the opposite. And I saw that. And, minus the habit, I could have, I identified with what they did. Social justice was talked about in my high school, and it was talked about in college. College, Vietnam was going on. There was opposition to Vietnam, even on our small campus. We joined protests and that sort of thing. Of course, we also had a walkout because we wanted no hours, which meant we wanted no curfew for the seniors. So, those were the two extremes, the interest at college. But I am very grateful to my parents for the opportunities that they gave me and my siblings for education.
So, fun fact, every member of the current Ohio Supreme Court is Catholic right now. So, fun fact, not drawing any judgment, but, So, when did you decide to be a lawyer?
I was in 6th grade, I remember, and we had panel discussions, and there was a little, current event, a newspaper that came out once a week, and you read it, and, you had to present. Different students had to, 4 students had to present, what was in the article, and then have a discussion, question. And I was on a panel, and the issue was taxation. And I can't remember the context of the article, but there was a statement that one of my classmates made that older people and people without children should not have to pay school taxes. Now, I'm in a Catholic school, and they're not getting any, taxes. I didn't really realize that or even think about that. But I remember my response was, wait a second, everybody in society benefits if you're educated. And these people are benefiting by children being educated and going on and staying in the community. My sixth grade teacher said, you ought to be a lawyer. So that's when the kernel of thinking about it. And then, I tell this story, and law school deans shudder when I say this, that I had graduated from college. I went on to work on a master's in teaching. I got through my student teaching experience. I only had my thesis left to do, and I decided I did not like children well enough to teach. And thousands of children have benefited from that decision, let me tell you. That gets me, a year and a half out of college. I guess a year, I take that back. Right after college, I worked for a year for a financial services company in their management training program. Did very well there, hated it. So I went back to school, and I'm going to be a teacher. That was in my mind. And so, we know how that worked out. And so, I had to make up my mind, what do I want to do? And my grandparents wanted to go to Ireland for like their umpteenth time, but they were too old to rent a car, so they needed a driver. So 8 weeks in the summer, I just drove around Ireland and, had a very good time. And so then I had to think about what I wanted to do. And, I kept going back to being a lawyer. And so I was substitute teaching during the day. I was waiting tables at the Brown Derby near the Cleveland Airport in the evening. And that was an education. Yeah, that was an education in and of itself. And so, I had some money in the bank, and I decided that I was either going to, I will apply to one law school. If I get into law school, I will go to law school. If I don't, I'm going to take all this money and bum around Europe for as long as it lasts and see what happens. I got into law school. And so that's how I ended up in law school. And I enjoyed law school. I mean, a lot of people say, oh my God, it was the worst thing. And I hated the bar exam, but I enjoyed law school.
Yeah, we're going to jump to your legal career, but before we do, I have to set up the frame for how this woman went through law school to tell you a little bit about her. She started law school in 1977 when less than 20% of law school classes were female, unlike today where 50% of law school classes are women. She got married in law school, had 2 children in law school because, quote, I didn't want to have to interrupt my career with children. So, so she's going through law school with 2 young children.
No, I didn't have the second one till the day after I graduated, Yvette.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I just spent 2 out of 3 years pregnant in law school. That's all.
And then after she has the kids, she has a private practice at home. But let's talk about how we go from a private practice at home with 2 toddlers to getting into Republican politics in Summit County and becoming a probate magistrate judge in Summit County.
Well, I was practicing. The beauty was the youngest was 2 and toilet trained, so they could go to daycare, and so that freed up the day. I practiced in probate court several occasions. One was a trial in front of the head magistrate there, and there was a vacancy that occurred because the woman that had that job, Mary Spicer, was elected to the Common Pleas Court. And so they, cast a net for, and I was asked to apply by George Wirtz. I always give George the credit. And he's still there, by the way, at probate court. And he really advocated for me to get the job. I was hired as a magistrate. I spent almost 9 years as a magistrate in probate court doing, guardianships of both adults and children, estates, of course, involuntary commitments of the mentally ill. set up, courts at all the mental wards in the county, and all the other stuff, name changes, all the stuff that comes to you. And in probate court, except for the adoptions, I did all the adoptions in the county, which were the joyous occasions. But the other occasions I just described, people are in turmoil, and you got to help them solve problems. And that's the role of a judge, is to be a problem solver. And sometimes, you don't have to necessarily look at the law to solve the problem. You can get compromise, in the parties. And that's the way I approached my job. And I was very successful at doing that. And so anyway, in Summit County, the politics, the Republican Party was run by Alex Arshenkoff, God rest his soul. And he was one of a kind. And as a magistrate, they had this system that you had to run, if you wanted to be a judge, a common pleas court judge or an appellate judge, you had to run and, as a obviously Republican, and challenge, a sitting judge or the opponent for an open seat. And that was, you paid your dues that way. And so I did. And lost elections. But, people were wondering why I wasn't, tearing my hair out, because, I worked hard, on the campaigns, but I knew that this was the system in Summit County in order to be recommended to the governor for, a position on the Court of Common Pleas, which is what I wanted to do. And lo and behold, Judge Baer retired, and my name was sent down along with two others, and Governor Voinovich appointed me to the court, the Common Pleas Court. Another place to solve to problem solve. The Common Pleas Court, very rarely, if ever, does anybody want to be in Common Pleas Court. You don't have, you have literally a captive audience, a captive audience. And, I really rolled up my sleeves and tried to look, well, first of all, be thoroughly familiar with the cases that I was hearing in pretrials, and try and work out compromises, settlements, and I was very successful. I think I went like 3 or 4 months without a trial because I had settled everything, including the criminal cases. So it was, I liked doing that. I did. I liked presiding over trials. I thought it was just a wonderful job, and the job that I thought that I would have for the rest of my career. Because, I had in my mind, I'm going to be a magistrate, then I'm going to be a Common Pleas Court judge. So then I had to stand for election because, you have to run the next general election, which was 2 years after I had been appointed. And I won by, I think, almost 70% of the vote to have my seat on the court. And then fast forward to January, around, I believe it was, they were looking to replace the prosecuting attorney in Summit County because that gentleman had been elected to the 9th District Court of Appeals. And the prosecuting attorney was one of the most important jobs in Summit County because it was one of the few prosecuting attorney offices in the state, I think there were only 6 at the time, that ran the Child Support Enforcement Agency. And there's only one institution that affects more children than Child Support Enforcement Agency, and that's our school system. So that tells you, how elevated and how many lives this touched. But so anyway, there were some gentlemen who wanted the job, and I felt, from my vantage point, that they shouldn't have the job. And I went to the Republican, Alex Arshenkoff, and I said, I will resign from being a judge if I get appointed to be the county prosecutor. He probably wanted to take me to one of those mental health institutions that I had presided over, but he was elated, that would happen. I talked to all my fellow members of the judiciary one at a time to let them know, and I remember one of them said, "Why do you want to work that hard?" And so anyway, I get appointed, and I knew that the Children's Defense Fund had come into Ohio and rated all of the agencies in every county, all of the child support enforcement agencies in every county. And Summit County was 87th out of 88 for effectiveness and, living up to what their duties and responsibilities are. I'm very proud that 2 years later, we were nominated for 2 national awards because of the improvement in the Child Support Enforcement Agency. That was not, okay, the only thing I did was hire the right people, get rid of the people that needed to get rid of, the director who was running a rug cleaning business out of his office. I kid you not, and put the right people in, and I did. I put managers in there, people who know, and wanted to be public servants. And that's the overarching, theme here. You want to be a public servant, and that, I think, is probably the most important title that I have had over all these years in my career, because it describes every position I've had, and that's, that's important to me.
So for those of you taking notes, the key to success as a leader is you hire good people and get out of their way. You let them do what they do.
I have
that
always
is the key,
done that.
right?
I did that in the Child Support Enforcement Agency, in the, in the civil division, the criminal division. Absolutely, we were a very successful office. And then they came
Governor
knocking.
Taft came calling.
They came knocking on the door for lieutenant governor. There were some people that they were considering. They wondered if I would be interested. I had the right pedigree. It's like they were a show dog. I was Northeast Ohio. I was a woman, criminal justice, the judiciary, and I
You
was
had an
Catholic.
engaging personality.
Oh, Irish Catholic with a name like O'Connor. Funny story about that. A friend of mine at the time, he and his wife went over to Ireland, and they were wearing a Taft O'Connor shirt over in Ireland. And people came up to him and said, "We know who O'Connor is, but who the hell's Taft?" I told Bob that.
Did he laugh?
Oh, yeah. So anyway, it worked out. I became lieutenant governor. I needed a real job because lieutenant governor at the time had really no statutory duties. So I was the director of the Department of Public Safety. Most important job, one of the most important jobs that I've ever had. I was director at the time of 9/11. So I was the liaison with Washington and all of our emergency management people in the state. Every county has an emergency management agency. We had a wonderful emergency management state agency, and Dale Shipley was the leader. And we were in such good shape compared to the other states because of the structure we had in Ohio and the people that were in those places. And that was a really daunting and gut-wrenching experience. I was on the ground at the World Trade Center 1 week to the day after the the planes had taken them down, and we had a search and rescue team from Ohio, specially trained members of the safety forces, emergency management forces from all over the state, came together the next day, and they were in New York City, and they were looking for survivors. That was what they did, and they didn't find any. And here I am a week later, and they hadn't found any live survivors, that's redundant, but no survivors. And they were just, it was, I'm not going to say they were demoralized, but they were very affected by that. So I show up with some other members of the Ohio cabinet. The adjutant general was with me, and I forget who else. But we brought just boxes of Grater's ice cream and Cheryl's cookies and an Ohio flag and, all this, stuff from Ohio, because they were set up at the Javits Center. And they were on cots, and they had, cordoned off, but, that's what they were doing. And then they'd go out all day and work, amongst the rubble. But the most important thing was I brought letters from their families. I still get choked up. That was unbelievable, the joy that brought them. It was, again, I still get choked up over it.
So we've got probably about 10 or more minutes left before we have to go to questions. So I want to talk about your term as the first female Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. And we know now how you got there. You all have a sense of the kind of woman and leader that she is and how she took the bench. And so a couple of things that are remarkable about when you took the bench. You immediately got to work. You had been an associate justice. You get elected as Chief Justice in 2010. You then call somebody and say, you better take this appointment to the court. So literally called me at 8. She called me at 8 in the morning. I sat straight up.
She was still in bed.
I know it was. I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
So she's like, this is Maureen O'Connor. I'll never forget that call. But anyway, so as soon as you get elected as Chief Justice, you immediately start to work. And following the George Floyd murder, she wrote this fabulous article that kind of went viral across the state and in the country. But the one line that I always remember, which is kind of how you led as a Chief Justice, you quoted President Kennedy in talking about why Black people were having protests downtown Columbus, and it defaced the Supreme Court, and how their views of justice were different than those who were not Black. And you quoted President Kennedy, and you said, "Life is not fair, but our government must be." And that really is how you have lived your public service. And so you get elected as Chief Justice, you immediately go about getting judges, for the judges and retired judges in this room, a pay raise. And that took a lot of shoe leather, convincing Governor Kasich, and then working with the leaders of the General Assembly. You started an Access to Justice Commission, you worked on criminal justice reform. You were so focused on making sure that the system, the judicial system in Ohio, from the time you started as chief to your last month, talking about bail, bonds, and fees, and how, bail had become a debtor's prison.
Right.
And it seems now that was informed probably by a lot of the Catholic education, social justice. But talk about the goals you wanted to accomplish as Chief Justice and what you feel like you left undone.
Fines, fees, and bail is a great example. I co-chaired a national commission on that, I wanted to see, what's our state doing? Here I am advocating across the country, and there was many systems as there are states, but let's focus and see what Ohio is doing. And I wanted this to be the model, that the first thing you do as a judge is presume that you're going to release without bond. Personal recognizant, if there has to be some conditions, maybe an ankle bracelet or, some other restrictions, drug testing, et cetera. You got a whole box of tools you can use, but you don't use cash because cash doesn't keep you safe, okay? Cash doesn't keep society safe. And it's just a burden on people who don't have it, and they sit in jail, and they sit. And it costs the taxpayers, and it's a stupid system, stupid. So then, the next thing is, okay, you're going to look at a reasonable bond. If it's not going to be personal recognizance, you look at a reasonable bond. What is it going to take to get this person back to court? Well, most of the people come back to court, and it's not because they posted $250, which, by the way, they had to scrape together God knows how, or $500 or whatever. They come back to court because they really don't have a choice. If they don't come back to court, it's not because they're intentionally going to abscond, they are horrible schedule managers. They don't have a calendar. They don't have a pocket calendar that, oh, I've got a court date right next to my, salon appointment. That's not the way it works. So, we have a system now in many of the jurisdictions where you get, a telephone reminder, just like you do, I just got one from my dentist, which I have to go to tomorrow. Are you going to be up here? Yeah, I'll be there. So, these are the type of things that are employed, and that has really helped the failure to appear numbers to decline. And it's just smart. It's just smart. But
the legislature wasn't happy, so they put something on the ballot.
That was after, yeah.
Yeah.
That was after the DuBose case, which was totally distorted. Totally
Tell everybody
distorted.
what that is.
It was a case where, there was a murder, and they had someone that the defendant, he was arrested. They put like $1.5 million on him, maybe to begin with, and it wasn't the type of defendant that was going to abscond, let's put it that way. And there's no way they could make that kind of a bond. There's plenty of very dangerous people that could make that kind of a bond, but this guy, couldn't. I think if my memory's correct, it was a drug deal gone bad, and this guy probably was guilty. And I think that he ended up being obviously convicted. But his bond was reduced when he got to the common pleas court, from $1.5 million to $500,000. And there was this uproar. Well, he couldn't make $500,000 either. So, he was sitting in jail. And there was this uproar that the judge did the wrong thing, et cetera. It comes up to the Supreme Court. We hear the case. And then, in a very, I think, scholarly opinion, Justice Melody Stewart lays out the purposes of bond, which is pretty much what I just told you. Never was it said that, we won't, use high bonds or whatever it means to keep society safe, but it recognized the constitutional right of a defendant to be innocent until, proven guilty. And, under those circumstances, for the vast majority of defendants, they don't need to have $1 million bond. So, or, a bond that they can't make. So that was the crux of the opinion. And that was weaponized during the campaigns of the Supreme Court justices in 22. And it was also then a constitutional amendment that a judge has to consider public safety when they're setting a bond. Duh. But that was the constitutional amendment we have now. Isn't that nice?
Is it frustrating now that it seems like, at least in Ohio right now, that the court, applies the Constitution, or as in redistricting, there's a constitutional amendment passed. The legislature ignores it, and then when they're unhappy with it, they try to pass a law to override the court's authority. Is that frustrating for you as you leave the court?
No, because it's not unique. I mean, it's not, first of all, I don't take anything personally. I never have. And you can't do that if you're in public office. You just can't take things personally. I knew what they were doing, and then they have this constitutional amendment, and at the same time, they've appealed the redistricting case to the United States Supreme Court. Just keeping this redistricting buzz going is what was, what was happening there. And, it's frustrating, but what can I do about it? Well, now that I'm retired, I can be involved with, efforts to maybe pass another constitutional amendment. And this time, the constitutional amendment depoliticizes the redistricting commission. There would be no elected officials on the redistricting commission in an ideal
Yes.
format. And other states have done it and done it successfully. And, Arizona, Iowa, Michigan come to mind, Colorado, California, just a lot of, well, I was just trying to do the conservative states, just to make a point. Anyway.
I don't believe we're conservative, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean Iowa, Arizona, come on. So anyway, if they can do it, we can do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to take a constitutional amendment, which is a very complicated thing to get off the ground, very time-consuming, very costly, and time will tell whether that happens. But it's something that I'm spending time on now with a core group of people. We're talking about it very seriously. Networking to a certain extent, and we're going to see where it goes, because even though here we are in 23, early 23, you got to get cracking on it if it's going to be on the ballot in November.
Got a lot of
24.
signatures to get.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to move into questions from our live stream and in-person audiences. And if you're watching online, please type your questions into the chat. Jane?
So I do have one question that was submitted ahead from Alban Bell. Do you think America is seeing a decline of constitutional law and order?
America's seeing a decline of constitutional law and order. I hope not. There's these high-profile incidences that happen in our country. I'm going to start out by saying most Americans do not know what the Constitution contains.
That's right. Sure.
And I think that's the failing of our education system. And I think that there should be some effort to familiarize people with the fact that there's the United States Constitution and there's an Ohio Constitution, and the difference, where the state constitution offering more protection. And so, people talk about, well, that's not constitutional, or I've got a right to do that, or whatever. They don't know, that. So is it declining? I don't know that it was ever at the point where, everybody had a faith in it and believed in it. And now we have acts of violence by public servants against, unarmed individuals and who die. And we have, there's about 100 different constitutional rights being violated right there. And it's on video, and it's on, and so how do people have faith in our institutions when we see members of our institutions murdering people? That's hard. Yeah. The courts, thankfully, the courts have the highest level of confidence the Americans, surveyed. This is just a recent survey by the National Center for State Courts. But the level that it is now in confidence is a decline from where it was just a year ago. Yeah. So I'm worried about that. I'm very worried about that. Yeah. What are we going to do to restore it?
Anyone who has a question, please
Judge
come on
Beatty?
up, and we'll go back and forth. So what's your perspective of colleges and universities who are, quote unquote, protecting students and the apparent curtailment of free thought and free speech on campuses?
They're doing what to students?
They're curtailing free thought, protecting their students from different opinions.
Oh, from hearing different points of views, conservative and liberal views on college campuses.
Oh, well, I mean, that's
crazy.
That's not education. That's all I'm going to say. That is just not education.
Judge Beatty Blunt?
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Chief Justice, thank you so much. Yvette, thank you so much. And I wholeheartedly agree with you, particularly anyone who has to run for election as a judge will tell anyone here that half of our campaign is educating people about the judicial system. Chief Justice, you know, if you go in certain circles, there are people who think everyone just lift up the jail and throw everybody under it, right? And then on the other side, you have people that say no one should ever go to jail or prison. And the person that thinks no one should go to jail probably hasn't talked to a murder victim's family. And someone who thinks that everyone should go to jail has probably never talked to someone who has overcome an addiction and done the work to become a productive citizen. And so my question, Chief Justice, is how do we get people out of their bubbles to see the other side and possibly get to the middle?
I think conversations. I think that has to be a purposeful education of people. If someone is, some group is advocating, as you said, let's throw everybody in jail and invite yourself to be a speaker there. I think it's important for judges especially to go out and speak about the system and speak about the tools that have been developed, specialized dockets, talk about treatment, talk about addiction, talk about what happens to a person's brain when they're addicted and what happens when they get clean, and how some people have to take methadone for the rest of their lives, but you know, that's okay. You know, all these things that we as judges know go on, and it is a response to people who are, quote, breaking the law. And, you know, if you hit them with the details of, you know, this is draining your tax dollars. It could go, you know, for, you know, better use. There's a whole host of arguments. But judges need to get off the bench and out into the public and speak at Rotaries, you know, whatever clubs that are out there, church organizations. Offer up your speaking, you know, and you will be asked to do it.
And since this is an education forum, one of the things you started was votes count, or
judicialvotescount.org.
yeah, people need to spend time. Don't fall for just the 30-second soundbite. Investigate who's running. Judge Beatty Blunt always says this: the most important time to know who your judge is not when you're standing in front of them. It's on election day.
In front of a judge, it's too late to care who the judge is. You have to care at the ballot box.
Yeah. The Ohio State Bar Association took over that. That's something that I started, judicialvotescount.org, and now it is with the Ohio State Bar Association. The legislature has funded it, you know, for the election cycle. So they're going to be, you know, taking it on, or have taken it on, and I am very grateful that they did so.
Thank you.
Ms. Looper?
The prior questioner and another judge on the appeals court bench are products of single-sex education in high school, and I think it truly prepared both of them to be on the appeals court of Franklin County. If indeed a constitutional amendment is drawn up to be voted on by the people in 2024, what will it say, and how will you educate people as to its importance to vote on?
Well, I can't tell you what it's going to say because the drafters haven't gotten together and figured it out, and it's a very complicated thing to do, because if there's one thing you need to do is consider all the angles, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, all of the angles and clarity. You know, that is the essence of what we need in our Constitution, clarity, not limitations, but clarity. And I know that, but I can't tell you right now if you gave me a piece of paper and a pen that I could draft it, because it will take a lot of very smart people coming together to do this, and it will be done. And resources and people volunteering, what's going to be necessary. So all of you in this room, keep in mind that you may be asked to circulate petitions and certainly vote Maybe, educate all your friends and coworkers, et cetera, if it, comes about, or I should say when it comes about. Because that's how, you got to start a buzz about this. And I think that, the buzz about redistricting, you say redistricting, you have to have been under a rock in Ohio if you don't know what the redistricting was, the fight over redistricting.
When the chief says clarity, she means look for loopholes. Because if there's any loophole in the language, it's going to be exploited.
Yeah.
This constitutional amendment they passed in 2015, it said should, it should have said shall. You've got to always be thinking about any way for politicians, assuming there's not an independent commission, that they can flout the will of the people.
And the constitutional amendments that were passed in 15 and 18 were drafted by the legislature.
Big mistake.
Not a citizens group or, it was by the legislature.
Yeah. Jane?
I have a couple questions, one from Kathy Fox and another person here, that they're basically addressing the the need for bipartisanship and the use of divisive and diverse topics to win elections. Any thoughts on our current state of the political parties?
They use what sells.
Yeah.
That's basically, the polls are done, interest groups are vetted, and if there's a hot topic, that will become the campaign, capture the campaign. And many times the candidate can direct the focus of the people for the campaign by creating the issues or identifying the issues, et cetera. Redistricting is going to be a big thing. It, already has been a big thing. But, the man who was the genius behind the redistricting was a guy by the name of Tom Loeffler, something like that. Terry, who was it? Do you remember? Hoffler, yeah. And his famous quote, no longer will the people pick the politicians will pick the people. And that's what redistricting is all about. And he said, there's a clip on YouTube, here's the beauty of redistricting, and he said the people will no longer pick the politicians will pick the people. And that, in a nutshell, is redistricting.
Next question.
Thank you both for your very informative comments, and in particular, Justice O'Connor. My name is Brian Urbanski, and I'm an affordable housing provider, and my wife and I have established a foundation, the Aubrey Affordable Housing Foundation. We're a 501c3, and we are one of very few housing providers in the Central Ohio area that are friendly to justice-involved individuals, people coming home from being incarcerated. And I'd like to hear both of your opinions. I greatly appreciate the work that you've done in this arena and trying to work with people in more fair and just situations. But as a community, what can we do for the folks that are coming back out of the system that don't have a community that's willing to provide housing for them and provide employment opportunities? What can we do as a community to be more welcoming to help get those folks back on track so we can start lowering the recidivism rate in Ohio? We have 20,000 people coming home every single year, and that's a lot of folks, and a lot of them, unfortunately, don't have the support to stay out of the system.
Exactly. The support system is missing. If they had a support system to begin with, they might not have chosen that path. So, that's a fact. Affordable housing, God bless you for doing that. We need more of that. But the hue and cry is not in my neighborhood. And, that has to be overcome. That's an issue for the city, city leaders to be forthcoming in supporting that. If I had the answer of, how can we create more jobs? Well, in this environment, if they are not hired quite frankly, I don't think it's their fault. I think that, it's the person doing the hiring, because everybody, needs people, especially ground level, people that are doing, you want a fair, pay for a day's work, absolutely. You don't want them taken advantage of. And if that, a group of businesses could appreciate that and, make a commitment to hire the folks, that's a place to start. There's organizations, that the Rotaries, and I keep saying the Rotaries, but there's the Lions Club, there's all kinds. But the Rotary is, a lot of local business people. Go talk to them. Volunteer to be their speaker. Talk about what you do and what the shortage is and what's needed. And challenge them in a nice way that, if you can be a solution for just one, if you need a worker just for, one, maybe two, ask them to do it face to face. That's my advice.
Great, thank you very much.
Ms. Emily?
Thank you so much for sharing some of your history and your story. One of the questions that I had is, I work with women who are trying to get elected to office at the Matriots, and it sounded like throughout your history, you selected opportunities that spoke to you, that were meaningful to you, and yet you turned around and also helped the Honorable Brown get selected to the court. So how do we help women, specifically women, no offense, gentlemen, specifically women identify those opportunities where they'll be able to serve and solve problems, and how do we help others who are in the role reach back and lift others up? What can we do better?
Well, I think it's, very important for women who have attained whatever level, of elected office, and not just the judiciary, but elected office, to reach back and, with a helping hand and bring someone along. Identify someone on your staff that, you think would be, suited with mentoring, added mentoring, and that person could, be whatever, the position is. Positions of leadership are not always elected positions of leadership, so there's, opportunities to grow into a role, so to speak, with an institution. And it's important for people who, as I said, have attained the position to remember what it was like. I speak to, I can't tell you how many school groups, in my career, and let them know. And I think one of the things is important. I don't really take it as a big deal that I'm the first woman Chief Justice, but other people do. And it's a symbol or, something for both girls and boys to recognize that, women can do, they're smart and they can attain and they can lead. And that's what my role as the first woman Chief Justice, I hope, emanates to, to the kids that I talk to, grade school, high school, and college.
Remember what Madeleine Albright said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. So, well, we wish we had more time, but now we're going to turn it back over to Joelle Kuzman for concluding remarks.
Well, I hope that you found today's program as inspiring as I did, and that you got a little bit of an insight as to why Justice O'Connor has been referred to as an independent voice on Ohio's Supreme Court. Thank you to today's forum partner, the Matriots. Thank you also to the Grange Insurance Audubon Center for its support. Thank you to our virtual seat patrons and to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting our live stream. And our very special appreciation to today's speakers, Justice Maureen O'Connor and our host, Yvette McGee Brown. Let's give them a round of applause. Please please make plans now to attend next Wednesday's forum here at the Grange Audubon Center. We'll be hosting a panel of distinguished Columbus religious leaders for a discussion on the role of religion in Central Ohio, led by our friend and former anchor, Jerry Revish. Lastly, thank all of you. We could not do this without you. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us.